You're listening to Raw, the podcast, the cyber resilience podcast for all existing and aspiring cyber professionals, putting the spotlight on the vital role that people and culture play in making organizations cyber safe. Resilient and cyber savvy people are an organization's strongest defense against cybercrime. I am your host, Marilise de Villiers. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Raw, the podcast. I am so delighted to be joined today by Melissa Agnes. Hi, Melissa. I'm so well, thank you. How are you? Brilliant. So before we dive in and find out more about Melissa, I'm going to just tell you a little bit more about her and the business person, and then we'll get into more of the personal side. But Melissa is the founder and CEO of the Crisis Ready Institute, and she's a recognized leading authority on crisis preparedness, reputation management, and brand protection. Agnes is the creator of the Crisis Ready model and author of Crisis Ready, Building an Invincible Brand in an Uncertain World. She is a coveted speaker, commentator, and advisor to some of today's leading organizations faced with the greatest risks. I recently met Melissa. We're both part of the Cyber Resilience Institute, and absolutely just loved and connected with you straight away. So very, very excited and delighted to have you with me today. Great. So let's dive straight in. And I always start with this question so that people can get to know you, the person, a little better. So who is Melissa, the person?
It's such a, it's like the hardest question you're going to ask me today. And that's okay.
I know.
So in anticipation of that being so hard for me, I put a thing out on Instagram that asked that question, that like, what do you know about me? Or what would you like to know about me? That's actually interesting to share, right? Because, originally I'm from Montreal, Canada. I live in New York City. I've been here since 2018. I was told today to mention that the reason I love maple syrup so much is because I'm Canadian. I'm an inquisitive person. I think by nature, I ask a lot of questions all the time. Somebody wrote to me that said that the questions I ask are kind of shocking and they create instant, like profound connections with people. So I think I'm really proud of that as a human, and it definitely serves my work. I think one of my kind of super talents or powers is being able to see deeper context in emotion, in the reasons why people do things or might do things, in the impacts of things, in empathy, like having empathy and compassion, all these things. And all of that plays into why I'm wired to do the work that I do, and I think why I do it so well. So I'm very grateful for that. And apart from that, I am somebody, I like experiences. I love experiences. I love experiencing new things. I'm always trying to challenge myself, learn, grow, and adventure around the world.
Love that. I love that. And I love your questions point, because I always say it's so important to ask better questions, to ask the right questions, because that determines the quality of the answers that we get. And I think in the work that you do and I do, we have to ask the right questions. So I'm very, I'm in awe. Absolutely love your work, and I think your approach is fantastic. And I think really crisis, and I know that you get really quite excited about, how we are not as prepared as we should be in this crazy world we live in. But let's just help our listeners and just set some context, because let's face it, social media, real-time news cycles, mobile technology, and it's really, really changed the landscape in terms of how we do crisis management. And I know that you've talked about this in your TED Talk ages ago, TEDx ages ago. I think it's 7 years ago now. But even, yes, can you believe that? But it's really that sort of even now, I think it's still not good enough. The status quo is not good enough. So just give us a little bit more about sort of the landscape so we can better understand what we mean by the crisis landscape.
The status quo is absolutely not good enough. And that's the thing. That's why I do what I do, is because I'm, who's Melissa Agnes? I'm not a complainer. So I get frustrated with things and I want to fix it. I think that's the male energy of me. But in the sense of, the status quo right now, when you look at crisis. So crisis is any type of event or situation that presents material and consequential impact on people, whether that's internally and or externally on the organization, the environment. And the environment to me can be the planet, depending on the company or depending on the type of business we're talking about. It could be the planet, it could also be the economy. People, environment, the organization's operations, its reputation, and or its bottom line. So to me, when I look at crisis, I'll answer your crisis landscape question, but to kind of set the tone and give context, when I look at crisis, no matter what, every single business, we have people, we have the planet, right, our environment, and we have our economy. So livelihood, right, our ability to live and breathe air and then to function and to save lives, and et cetera. The reason I'm so frustrated with the status quo is because there's so much, but when we dig down to the kind of more to the foundation of it, we're not taught in school how to lead through change, challenge, and crisis. We're not given the tools. So right now we have a world in both the private and public sectors of leaders who don't know how to rise and lead in times of crisis. And we've experienced that over the last almost 3 years now. And at the tables and the seats that I sit at globally, I've witnessed that to a shocking degree, just behind the scenes on what happens. And so add to like the crisis landscape, we have this big, powerful, people don't know how to lead. They're not taught. They don't have the confidence or the competence to lead through crisis. In addition to that, what makes the landscape so complicated, I mean, you named a few, Mary-Lise, but emotion, right? Your own emotion and having to lead through change, challenge, and crisis, as well as the emotion of every single other impacted party or potentially impacted party when we're talking reputation, operations, bottom line, people, environment. Then you have everything that comes with the digital landscape and real-time media and sensationalization, and the world lives in controversy right now, and that just feeds the emotion. There's so much, and then you have to figure out, in a crisis, you don't have all of the answers. That's a part of what a crisis is, right? The answers come fragmentally over a period of time. Meanwhile, you feel all of this pressure because you have this potential impact or this, very strong potential impact materially on people, environment, operations, reputation, bottom line. So it's this very, very hectic time, emotional time, because we're emotional beings as human beings, even the most logical of us, right? We sometimes don't like to admit it, but we're emotional beings. That's by nature who we are. 100%. And it's just this perpetuating kind of cycle of chaos. And in it, currently, right now, the world, professionals, adults, leaders, don't have the skills or the competency, which comes from the skills, to rise up and say, I've got this, follow me, we're going to get through it together, and to actually put the right actions and communications in the right timeline so that you can actually effectively do that. I know that was a lot, but you're asking for set the landscape for crisis and why status quo isn't good enough and why we're failing so massively on a global scale. That's just, me saying that in 5 minutes.
And that's beautiful and powerful stuff and scary at the same time.
Very scary. But it's frustration.
But it's fascinating that it always comes back to people and emotions, and it's so closely aligned with what I'm all about, is that sort of personal resilience and building your resilience muscle so that you're strong enough from the inside out to navigate navigate these, I love what you say, change, challenge, crises. It's all those things, because it isn't just change, it's the change with the challenge on top of it and the crisis on top of it. So it just creates a very, very complicated narrative. And I think what really resonated with me when you said about we're not taught this stuff at school. One of my biggest bugbears is around critical thinking. And I think it plays nicely into what you've just said, is that we're not taught how to think critically, and challenge what we see, and what's sort of happening around us.
And that's perpetuated today with the instant gratification of things and the shortened attention span. So we read a headline that's sensationalized, that's created to be sensationalized, to trigger fear, to trigger anger, to trigger sadness, like whatever the emotion is. We don't have the capacity, generally speaking, people don't have the capacity yet to then self-reflect and say, why do I feel this way? So critical thought, but as well as self-awareness and digging in and, why am I triggered this way? And with the instant gratification and the short attention spans, that sensationalized headline that was created to trigger something in you and to manipulate you in that way, to your point, society doesn't then typically dig in and actually read the 1,000 words of, essay or article that actually gives more, that would allow for critical thought. So it's this perpetuating cycle of a mess right now, that my work is trying to figure out where do we even start and begin, and how do we teach this skill and the awareness so that we can have more leaders who are competent and confident to rise to an occasion and see the opportunity in it, not a self-serving opportunity, but a beautiful opportunity for connection and growth and building relationships. Every single business, I don't care what business you're in, whether you're private sector, public sector, if you cater to animals, the common denominator is human beings. Even if you cater to animals, you still are selling to the humans who bring that product home or service home to their animals, right? It's human beings. Crisis management, crisis communication, and communication being one of the most challenging aspects of being human, never mind in crisis, just in general, is all about doing right by those people that your business is designed to serve, or even on a personal level that you love, who you love, and are responsible for in some capacity. It's doing right by those people when you're put to the test and it matters most. That when it comes down to it, that is the importance of learning this skill set. It's really
so it's about doing the right thing when it matters the most. I love that.
And knowing
yeah, absolutely. And so the whole leadership, I want to talk a little bit more about leadership, because what strikes me is that, when I reflect back on the early days of COVID, and the leaders that sort of were rising and navigating, versus the ones that were really, really struggling. And I think organizations that were struggling were already in trouble before COVID. So I don't think it's necessarily COVID. It's just, perpetuated it and put a spotlight on it. But what I thought, and this would be really helpful to get your perspective, is that the leaders who sort of rose were the ones that were able to lead, but also be vulnerable. So they were the ones that were sort of, bringing people along and saying, can we figure this out together, but still be the leader?
So I love that you touched on that, because that is new content material, IP, like whatever, however you want to call it, that the Institute is publishing right now. And so we have a Crisis Ready course that's coming out in September, a 10-week, 15-hour course. And this is a big piece of it. So historically speaking, when you think of a leader, right, you think of, and just kind of generally speaking, you think of somebody who's very confident, somebody who's very assured, somebody who is very stoic and stands tall and is not emotive at all. There is no place for emotion, right, historically in business or in leadership, and there's a very big guard. And that was, traditionally speaking, that was a leader. Today, that's not a successful leader. Meanwhile, to your point, so crisis management requires this, and communication requires this very delicate balance between providing reassurance that, you're going to guide and show the action steps and provide the action steps and all the directives to reassure that we're going to go in the right direction. We're going to heal whatever it is that needs to be healed and fixed. Hope for a better tomorrow, right? A shared vision of what you're working towards, whether it's your company's working towards it, the world is working towards it, whatever it is. But when people are in doubt and despair and angry or worried or scared, whatever it is, they need that hope, right? And a strong leader provides that hope. And vulnerability, because that vulnerability is that human connection. And being vulnerable, and Brene Brown's work is beautiful because is brilliant. It's not beautiful; it's brilliant because she talks about courage and how you can't have courage without vulnerability. And historically, that stoic, strong, reassured, is never wrong leader is not vulnerable, right? So that is the leadership, quote unquote leadership, that people have in their minds, historically speaking, generationally speaking, that's what a leader is. But then you look at somebody like Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister of New Zealand, who reassured, because at the start of COVID, within 48 hours of COVID hitting New Zealand, she came out with a very decisive plan and clear communications around what that plan was. So she led and she reassured with that, with those directives, with that plan of action, with that. She provided hope, and she had the courage to sit there, for example, and make herself human. So there's 5 hindrances of crisis ready that get in the way of this courageous piece, right? That the vulnerability falls under. And just as an example, she would do Facebook Lives with a country after she put her children to bed, not dressed perfectly, not all made up, hair wasn't perfect, sweatshirt and like spit up from her kids, and sat there and had real talk with her citizens and let them know, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. Yes, I'm scared too. No, I don't have all the answers. Let me answer yours. We're going to do this together. We're a team of 5 million. Like, that is what is required today. And that is the thing. That is one of the things, I feel like I'm rambling, but that is one of the things that is not taught, and is the most scary thing, is to be vulnerable, right? To come out as a leader and to not have all the answers and to admit that is a very challenging, uncomfortable space. Meanwhile, if you're also providing that reassurance and that hope, so it's really this delicate balance. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it's vulnerable. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it doesn't feel great at all, but it's relatable, it's human, and it's trustworthy. Because you want, as society, we want to follow, we follow the people who stand up and say, I don't have all the answers, but here's what we're going to do because here's what we know. And if tomorrow we get more information and we have to redirect our course of action of our plan, we're going to do that, but we're going to do that together. And we're going to do that with the facts. And we're going to do that with what we know at that time. We're going to continue to do that versus the person that stands up and says, follow me. I always have the right answers. I will get this right. And it's never wrong. And is too scared ultimately to be vulnerable to then change course of action and takes you down the wrong path. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I absolutely love that you've brought in courage and Brene Brown's work, because I'm 100% on board with that. Courage and vulnerability are two sides of the same coin. And I think the word for me that comes to mind is authenticity. And because we also have, everybody has a unique story, and that's what makes humans so complex and so beautiful. But I always very much promote this idea that your message matters. So the more you can bring your personal story and your vulnerability to the fore, and I love that you say trustworthy, because I think trustworthiness is incredible. But you generate that trust, you earn that trust by being vulnerable. And so I'm just going to summarize the 3 things because I think it's absolutely fantastic. So reassurance, giving people hope, and then vulnerability. So that's the kind of the balance.
Yeah, courage to be vulnerable, courage to be authentic, courage to be real, and courage to not have all the answers when you don't have all the answers, but the reassurance and the hope that you will, when as it becomes discoverable and uncoverable, and that it'll be shared. It really is this fine balance, and reassurance and hope is what historically leaders are good at. They're not good at that courageous vulnerability piece because society didn't permit it. And when I say we're not taught that in school, we're not taught about, what I call the 5 hindrances of crisis ready that get in the way of that courage and vulnerability, which are avoidance, ego, fear, ignorance, and politics. which we could have a whole discussion on that.
Yes.
But it's all human. It's all human nature in it. And so right now, anyways, with the Crisis Ready Institute, these are the things that I'm seeing as when I think about, what's going on in the world, when I observe and coach and teach and advise and what's going on in the world, these are like the underlying core foundational pieces of what's wrong and what's missing and what is needed. And so Crisis Ready Institute that's where we're focusing on bringing this skill set, this awareness, this mindset, and these capabilities to anybody and everybody, because we're all leaders and we all need to have this. We need to have this for our children. We need to have this for our teammates. We need to have this for our communities, and for leading businesses. So that's the focus.
And that's why I love your mission. It's so amazing. It's like to create a crisis resilient world. I mean, as you say, it's everybody. And I think that's what you've just reiterated. It is for everybody. And I think the younger we can start, and this is an area I'm increasingly passionate about, is I've got 2 teenage boys, and really just observing their curriculum and how this stuff is completely missing. It really bugs me, really bugs me.
I know, trust me. I don't have children, and I wonder, and I would love to have children, and I wonder, I have to remind myself that yes, it's it's a good thing to bring people into this world because it's so frustrating.
That is, and I think that is where people like us, who want to make it a better place, and who are challenging the status quo, and who are inviting, I think, people to really connect with their inner power and their inner being, and their higher power, dare I say, I think is absolutely where the secret, and that is the secret, but I think it's very, very alien to lots of people and not traditionally acceptable, especially in an organizational corporate context.
And that is shifting. The good news is that the opportunity for openness, for just that type of discovery and acceptance is shifting towards allowance and openness. So that's a positive thing. The piece of light.
Absolutely. Talk to me about your crisis ready model that you've developed, and how bring that to life for us a bit.
The crisis ready model is, when I wrote my book, I needed to figure out, I don't see any of the crisis management, crisis readiness. So crisis ready is about building a crisis ready culture. It's not about having a plan that sits on a shelf, right? You need to plan, but you develop a program, you integrate into the culture, because ultimately, to everything that we're speaking about, you want an entire organization filled with people who have this mindset, the skill set, and the capability to rise up and lead through challenge, to know what to do, and to come out of any type of issue or crisis with increased trust and credibility with those who matter most to your business. Like, that's the vision, that's the goal. So the crisis ready model was developed by a brilliant friend of mine named James, who, while I sat down to write my book, needed help in going, I don't do this in a linear fashion. Like, I work with an organization, I get very, very deeply woven into the company and the business, like all of it. And it just comes naturally to me. How do I put this in a comprehensive, cohesive way, linear fashion kind of for the book? So she sat down with me. She's brilliant. And she helped me develop this contextual model. She listened to me ramble for 90 minutes and came back with this contextual model, which is her brilliant brain. And ultimately, it's the phases of becoming crisis ready. And it's designed at the beginning of the book. Throughout the book, it's a pyramid. So it's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then when you get to the pinnacle, you're crisis ready, but then it becomes cyclical. So now this pyramid turns into a circle, because it's being crisis ready, because it's part of your culture, because it's mindset, skill set, capability. It needs to be a living, breathing aspect of who you are as an organization and who you are as a leader. So it becomes like this cycle thing. So the first phase is to auditing where you sit on the spectrum of crisis ready, which is ultimately where your mindset is as a culture, where your skill set is of your team, of your people, to respond to change, challenge, controversy, crisis, and where the capabilities. So the capabilities are your governance and your processes and your procedures and your protocols that enable the mindset and the skill set to work effectively, right? To let that engine run together seamlessly. So you do an audit, and you understand, kind of benchmark where you are, where your goals are. The second phase of the model is to understand. So understanding variables and impacts. Here you're going to, what are your high risk scenarios? How does your organization define crisis? Because a crisis for one company is not necessarily a crisis for another company, and oftentimes it isn't. And what are your thresholds that take something from an issue to crisis level, and then also importantly, back down from crisis to issue level, right down to non-issue level. So understanding the different variables, components to what all of the pieces or part of the pieces of what will then become your program. The next one is to identify scenarios and stakeholders. So now you're digging more into, every organization has a series of what we call high-risk scenarios that are your most likely high-impact situations from a negative standpoint, right? And it doesn't have to be triggered by negativity. You can get an onslaught of, like, you could go on, I don't know, own channel or whatever makes sense to your business and talk about your business, and tomorrow you get literally like 1 million new subscribers or customers or whatever, and you don't have the capacity to handle that. That could be a crisis. Operationally, that's a crisis. So it could be triggered by a positive thing. But where are your risks? And most importantly, who are your stakeholders? And what is their tie to your brand values? What is their emotional tie to your organization? What matters to them when you look at those high-risk scenarios? What the impact? What matters to them and why? What's the emotions involved if that scenario were to come to light? So understanding, identifying the remainder of the pieces of that massive jigsaw puzzle that is your crisis-ready program. From there, you want to design your program. So that's a whole thing in and of itself, but it's designing the program, the processes, the governance structure, your crisis communication processes, everything that you'll put down on paper that then you want to implement, because remember, it's cultural, you want to implement into the culture of the organization, which is the final stage before it becomes simple and you start all over again continuously. One of the things that's really important about the crisis-ready model and the way that it was designed is we've identified over the course of my career, there's always these obstacles. There's always the same consistent obstacle that challenge, whether it's the one to all of the 5 crisis-ready hindrances or hindrances of crisis-ready, whether it's gaining buy-in and support from different members of the team, and if it's cultural, you need everybody's buy-in and support. So the way that it's structured is that, and the process that you undergo, the way that we undergo the process is you're bringing everybody who's a part of your crisis-ready team into the picture from the get-go. And you're creating that buy-in and support, and you're finding the obstacles that you want to find pre-crisis and not deal with in crisis that become bottlenecks and stalemates and all these things. So it's very meticulously designed to get, when we get to the end, there's a sense of ownership of everybody's role and responsibility. There's a sense of opportunity versus challenge or negativity involved with it, which are two examples of common challenges. Yeah.
That is incredible.
That was a lot.
That's incredible, and I think it's amazing that you have developed this training course, this program. I saw earlier today on LinkedIn, and it looks like it's going to be an amazing course.
I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, no, and it's something that I think it's coming at exactly the right time.
So it's needed.
Yeah.
It's needed.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing like it. You can't find the material that we teach in this course anywhere else. And it's so needed. And it's fun. I mean, anybody who's read my book knows that there's games built into the book. There's strategy sessions built into the book. There's like all of these things to make this subject matter and the learnings that come with it fun and empowering and inspiring versus dark and gloomy and cumbersome and heavy. So that's, I think. Go ahead.
And I think what I love is the sort of people-centric, the culture drive, because all my work is centered around embedding secure mindsets and habits into organizational cultures. So cybersecurity, it's demystifying cybersecurity. It's everybody's responsibility. And how do you engage people with the the subject matter, but also doing the right thing, behaving in the right way in that sort of moment that matters. So I talk about moments that matter. So those are sort of the high risk touch points where people interact with systems and data, and where they actually, if they don't make the right decision, they actually can cause a serious security incident. And then, of course, we're in crisis mode, right? So I love how what you're saying is so complementary and in alignment with the way I approach behavioral change from a cybersecurity perspective. And it all comes back down to how do we identify the moments that matter, those high risk touch points, the things that are most important, and how do we get that sort of biggest bang for our buck? But then it's the mindsets, it's the skill sets, it's the capabilities, and it all comes beautifully together, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And it's seeing it goes to the mindset, but it's seeing it as, I'm very frustrated with the world, right? Like right now, the world is a very frustrating place. There's so much pain. There's so much suffering. There's so much lack of leadership that's causing the pain and the suffering. And it's perpetual and it's heavy. But then I look at it and I say, okay, but where are the underlying problems that I have the power to tackle and to do my best to serve with, right? And to support people with and help people with. And then when people ask me, like, how is my work not heavy? Because the work that we do, it's that mindset. I see it as, I help companies, I help professionals and leaders take a negative situation and transform it into something that builds. You talk about resilience. Resilience is coming back, right? It's coming back. When you're going through a challenge, if you see it the right way, if you choose the lens to see it, one of the things I say is that the lens through which you choose to see a negative event directly impacts the actions you take, which directly impacts the results. So if you choose to see it in an opportunity-driven way, in a connection way, in a way to serve the people that you're designed to serve and strengthen the relationships that you share with them, then you're not just resilient where you bounce back, but you're actually coming back stronger and better and with even more opportunity than you had before. And that goes to mindset. That goes to the cultural component of how do you as a human and your team, and how do you lead your team to view those types of challenges? Are they pains in the butt? Are they annoyances? Are they something to panic over? Or are you strong enough, courageous enough to be vulnerable and to fix what needs to be fixed so that you can come back even stronger? And to me, that's the thing that I have to see in order to not be overwhelmed with the frustration and sometimes the discouragement and despair in my worst moments. But it really is, how do we make the world a better place and connect people and alleviate the suffering that's existing?
And that role of the leader to create that vision and that opportunity and, putting people in that mindset or helping people to see the opportunity, I think that's probably the most important job of a leader, to really help drive it forward. So,
right? Is that hope?
Yeah.
Can you combine that with the reassurance and the direction, because the leader needs to give direction and to lead, and then as well as that humanity piece, which takes a lot of courage.
And it's so reassuring for me that you're highlighting hope. I'll be vulnerable for a moment, because when I was in my situation at work where working with a bully, he always used to criticize my hope. I was always very positive. I was always thinking about opportunity, and that was always the thing that he criticized about me. And he's always like, Marilise, you can't build things on hope. And I'm like, you're actually telling me today it's actually one of the core leadership pillars.
No, he was very mistaken. What you can't do is look at luck as a strategy. That's what you can't do. But hope, what do we have if we don't have hope? So that's on him. That's his, and that's his personal struggle, or one of them in his journey.
Yeah, it's still poignant in my head today, and I still remember it. So, it's as much what you learn from how not to do it than how to do it as well. So I've taken lots of valuable learnings.
I've transformed cultures of sinking companies into. I haven't done it single-handedly. We do it as a team, but right, like through the crisis ready work, we have transformed sinking companies to flourishing, growing companies. And hope, instilling that hope in leadership and in their teams, and is a big piece of that success. It's a game changer and a strong leader. So you didn't call him a leader, you called him a bully. That's not a leader.
No, he wasn't.
A strong
he
leader
wasn't.
provides that hope, inspires for a bigger tomorrow, a greater tomorrow, and something that is bigger than oneself, but is that oneself is required in order to achieve it. And that is a very, very, very powerful thing for human beings.
Beautiful. And so what would be the top 3 things that you would love people to take away from this conversation?
Man, I mean, those 3 things, I think not necessarily 3 things, but one thing, because 3 things might be a lot. But
one thing's good.
Learn more. If this conversation is interesting to you, is inspiring to you, is even just intriguing to you, dig deeper, because we need this. We need human beings. We need adults and professionals and leaders to be able to have this mindset and the skills and the capability to reassure, provide hope, and to be courageous enough in times of change, challenge, and crisis. We need a massive amount of this right now, and we all have the capacity, and it really is a learnable skill. It's a learnable skill. It's not, I'm not special, right? It's just something I've developed over time and continue to hone because I'm human, and it's really challenging. So if there's anything about this that is intriguing to you, then I invite you and encourage you to dig in a little bit deeper and to learn more and to follow the path that is enlightening to you, right? It doesn't have to be all of it, but whatever speaks to you is the path that you can follow. And I hope that you're courageous enough to do so.
And I love how you've brought the conversation full circle, because we started this conversation with you talking about curiosity and asking questions. And I think the digging deeper, the learning more, the being curious, the being courageous is all about asking better questions in order to get better answers. Thank you so much, Melissa. We can carry on for hours, and we will carry on for hours because there's so much more that I would love to know and share. But really just very, very, very glad and very honored to have you here with me today. So if you want to get in touch with Melissa, you can find her on LinkedIn or Instagram at Melissa Agnes. And you can also find her at the crisisreadyinstitute.com if you want to get in touch. As she highlighted earlier, her new training course is coming out soon. Who is that aimed at, Melissa?
Communication professionals, specifically. And that doesn't mean that you have to be a professional or consultant or in-house. It just means that you are responsible for communication and you want to strengthen that skill set, because it is a massive portion of successful crisis management and crisis leadership. And communication is, to hone that skill and to get stronger in that serves your personal relationships, serves your personal life as well as your professional life. It's a 10-week, 15-hour course with, I'm so excited about it. That's just like the tip of the iceberg. It's going to be a lot deeper than that, but, and fun, a lot of fun.
Love that. I always say, we should have so much more fun.
Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah. I'm working with a coach at the moment, and she always says it's hard until it's easy. But she's very much about enjoying the process and having fun along the way. And so great, amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Everyone, thank you for tuning in today. We hope you found today's episode useful and you took away a few key points. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to get our latest episodes. To find out more and how we can help you and your organization strengthen its resilience muscle and find your roar, head over to marilysedeviliers.com.